Pakistani nationals.
Mohammed?
Mohammed, we can't hear you.
Mohammed, can you unmute now and see if it's working?
Okay. A little bit of a technical difficulty, but we figured it out. So the TPS Pakistan campaign emerged in the context of 2002, when massive floods had hit Pakistan, causing 1,700 deaths, rapidly deteriorated infrastructure. And since then, over the past year, there's been rapid deterioration of economic, social, political, environmental conditions across Pakistan that have amplified compounding problems that Pakistan has been facing over the years. Pakistan, as some of you may know, is also one of the key kind of nation states that's facing climate threats. And so these are
Mohammed, we lost your voice again. One second.
Okay. Greetings, folks. My name is Fahad Ahmed. I am the Executive Director of DRUM. While we figure out technical issues, I will take over. As Mohammed was mentioning, Pakistan is one of the countries that is highly impacted by the climate disasters and is also facing multiple crises that are happening at the current time. Inflation is at a record high, food prices are really out of reach. We are facing a food shortage, which is in part exacerbated by the floods last year, as well as global conditions. There is a health crisis, as Dr. Alia Haider will talk about. There's a political crisis between the mainstream parties and between the military that is creating further instability and lack of security. And it is in this context that we are really trying to lead the campaign for TPS. The briefing today is intended for federal elected officials. We are honored to have the representative Sheila Jackson Lee on, who will talk about a federal resolution. We've also invited journalists who can cover what is going on currently in Pakistan, because one of our speakers will be speaking particularly to all the issues that are happening in Pakistan that are not being covered currently. We've invited community organizations, activists, and organizers so that they can figure out how to get involved in the campaign. And we've invited directly impacted community members who can hear more about the campaign and figure out how to get involved. And given all the crises that are taking place, there is a sense of urgency. Pakistan just barely escaped an economic default in the last few weeks, pursuant to a last-minute IMF loan. But those IMF loans themselves enable the worsening of conditions in Pakistan and are part of the root cause, as you'll hear from some of the speakers. So the situation remains critical, and probably one of the most marked signs of that is what we saw with the boat tragedy in the Mediterranean a little over a month ago, where over 400 Pakistanis were amongst the 700 people on that boat. And it included men, women, children, and elderly people. And I think that those high numbers are reflective of the crisis in Pakistan and the waves of migrants that it is causing that are seeking out security, better economic conditions, better health conditions, and better life conditions. And so the campaign for TPS for Pakistan has been ongoing for nearly a year. We were on the congressional side, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee spearheaded a letter of about 20 congressional representatives to DHS and the relevant agencies. On the Senate side, Senator Kristen Gillibrand spearheaded a letter with about 12 senators. Our coalition, comprised of DRUM, CUSP, Communities United for Status and Protection, and MASA DC, spearheaded 2 letters, one for special student relief that would impact and benefit Pakistani international students. That one had over 100 signatory organizations, and a second letter, particularly for TPS, temporary protected status, that had also about 115 to 120 organizations signed on. In brief, what we want to share about TPS is that temporary protected status is a status accorded by the US government. What it does is allows people with citizenship of those countries that are here within the United States to be able to be protected from deportations, to be able to have access to work permits and work legally so that they can not only support themselves, but also support recovery efforts or support their families and their communities back home. And in many different states, it also allows access to health benefits, educational access, and multiple other things. And then the Special Student Relief Campaign does the same similarly for international students, and allows them to lessen their workloads, which are generally a criteria or requirement that they're allowed to required to carry. And so it allows them to deal with their have a little bit more flexibility so that they can reduce their educational workload while being able to have access to a work permit so that they can work, support themselves, and support their families. Our agenda today, we will do introductions, introduce all of our speakers at the top, all our guest speakers. That will include Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, Dr. Alia Haider, and Fatima Razzaq. And then after their introductions, we will have them speak, and then we will have impacted people, a Pakistani international student and a Pakistani worker, both of whom are members of DRUM, will also speak and share how they have been impacted by the events in Pakistan. And then we will hear from a couple of the advocates that have been involved in this campaign. And then to round us out and will be New York City Council member Shahana Hanif, who will share the work that they are doing on the New York City resolution. I will get started with the bios. First is Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who is the Democratic Chief Deputy Whip for the United States House of Representatives and the co-chair of the House Pakistan Caucus, and been a steadfast ally of Pakistani communities in the US. She's the author and lead sponsor of the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, which established the first new federal holiday in 38 years. And Congresswoman Jackson Lee is the author and fighter for the passage of the Violence Against Women's Act, signed by the president for the first time in almost a decade. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is an influential and forceful voice in Washington. She's serving her 14th term as the United States House of Representatives member, and she represents the 18th Congressional District of Texas, centered in Houston, the world's energy capital. Considered by many as the voice of reason, she's dedicated to holding the constitutional rights of all people. She sits on 3 congressional committees as a senior member of the House Committees on Judiciary, Homeland Security, and the Crucial Budget Committee. She was appointed the first female ranking member of the Judiciary Subcommittee for Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security, which she now chairs. And she helped lead a delegation to Pakistan after the Pakistan floods in 2022 and introduced a recent resolution to uplift the demand for the Biden administration to grant TPS for Pakistani nationals without haste. We also have New York City Councilwoman Shahana Hanif, who represents the 39th Council District, born and raised in District 39 to Bangladeshi immigrant parents. Shahana has spent her life fighting for working class families and a city rooted in care, equity, and justice for all. Before being elected to City Council, Shahana served as the Director of Organizing and Community Engagement in former District 39 and Council member Brad Lander's office, where she led grassroots initiatives like participatory budgeting, a process that gives New Yorkers a say in how to spend city dollars in their neighborhoods. She's also served as a tenant rights organizer, a gender justice organizer, and an interfaith organizer. Shahana is the first Muslim woman elected to New York City Council and the first woman to represent the 39th District. In her first term, she introduced several pieces of transformative legislation, from mandatory universal residential composting program to 7 paid days of sick leave for gig workers and other independent contractors. On the community level, Shahana and her staff are working to address Black bloc sanitation issues, promote educational equity across classrooms, expand open streets and funding for parks and playgrounds, and implement flooding resilient housing infrastructure, and center the needs of women, youth, immigrants, and seniors. And then most recently, in collaboration with impacted Pakistani members of DRUM, Shahana has constructed and introduced a resolution voicing support of TPS for Pakistani nationals. We will first have Representative Sheila Jackson Lee speak, and I will turn it over to her. We're honored to have you, Representative Jackson Lee. Okay, it seems like they may need a few more minutes. Let me do introductions also of 2 of our expert speakers from Pakistan. Dr. Alia Haider is a renowned Pakistani activist and health practitioner, hails from the minority Hazara community in the highly securitized and conflict-ridden city of Quetta, Pakistan. She has been constantly organizing and mobilizing around issues of public health, women's rights, climate justice, and workers' rights. Dr. Haider was nominated in the Human Rights Recognition Award in 2022 for her efforts in providing medical relief in the flood-affected and working-class areas of Pakistan. Fatima Razzaq is a renowned Pakistani activist and an investigative journalist who is one of the people leading Lok Sujag, a multilingual digital media platform dedicated to the voices from the margins of power. Her areas of focus are human rights, gender, religious minorities, education, and climate change. Fatima has worked on the field for months with the flood-impacted communities to make sure their voices and stories are heard, and has been the most prominent media outlet to cover the aftermath of the floods, when mainstream media, both in Pakistan and internationally, has largely moved on and stopped covering the events. I would now like to, I think since we're waiting on Representative Jackson Lee, I believe I will first invite Dr. Alia Haider to share their comments.
Hi and salam everyone. Thank you, Fahad, and thank you, Muhibba, for having me here. So it was a really nice introduction. Thank you. So my name is Dr. Alia Haider. I'm a human rights and health rights activist from Quetta, Balochistan, and I'm basically based in Lahore, and I've been working for the working class areas. So, and this discussion is really important, and it because this discussion will put an insight to the havoc situation that is happening in Pakistan, the crisis that was really unknown to a lot of people, the crisis that was never shown on the television. People really didn't had an insight about it. Last year, Pakistan was hit with the most catastrophic climate change and flood. Millions of people were stranded and lost their lives and family in just a blink of an eye. I was on the ground for more than 1 month to provide healthcare to the flood victims. When I left Punjab for the flood relief, I never thought that the situation, what would really be the situation in the flood affected areas. But as I was passing by the areas, crossing every submerged cities, I understood that the situation is not really what it was shown on the television to the people around the world, around Pakistan. The situation was way more devastating than it actually shown to the people. Millions of people were homeless. Millions of pregnant women and children were stranded under the sky without their home, without shelter, without food, without clothes. Women didn't had proper, toiletry system for them. They used to put clothes around them and used to drape it and use it for washrooms and all those things. The situation, it was like when you first go into those areas, you are from this city where people almost have everything. And once you enter on those interior areas of Balochistan, South Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, you really understand what our government have been really doing. The flood crisis not only, opened the eyes of the people to the exact situation that was happening in Balochistan, in KPK, but also it was an eye-opening for the bureaucratic and the governmental system that they had not done nothing for the past 70 years for those people. The irony of the situation was that no governmental body were present at that time. All the flood relief was done by the people of Pakistan or different local NGOs. And that was also done on a very smaller level. As Fahad said that I was on the ground, providing healthcare. I was just a doctor doing my thing in my hospital. And then suddenly I realized, what am I really doing here? There are hundreds and thousands of doctors who can actually, do these things, what I'm actually doing in Lahore. So I should go to those areas. People really need me. I took 4-5 friends of mine who are doctors, 2-3 volunteers, started collecting donations from our friends and people donated. Actually, they really wanted to help. People of Pakistan really wanted to help their citizens, but the government of Pakistan didn't really knew how to help those people. I'm from Balochistan. My house was hit with a flood. My mother was trapped in my home for like many weeks. Quetta had complete blackout for 3 days, and we were unable to reach our loved ones. The amount of helplessness was incomparable. It was just a situation with me, and hundreds, thousands of people, millions of people were actually suffering way more worse situation than what I was feeling. Balochistan and Sindh were the most affected provinces. Balochistan is a province in Pakistan that is the biggest in the area, that has the most amount of minerals, coal, and all the Pakistan's economical stability comes from Balochistan. Balochistan is also is a route for Gwadar that is the largest route that has ever been made. CPAC, we are all aware of that. But the people didn't really had anything. Because whenever there is an industrialization or any kind of infrastructure building, the first thing that goes is that the people of that area profit or benefit from that. But unlike that, Balochistan does not have anything. Balochistan people didn't have any proper healthcare access. The hospitals were abandoned. The situation was so worse that people didn't really knew where to take their loved ones. Those people who were sick, those people who actually needs healthcare, either they used to take them to Larkana, that is in Sindh, or to Koita, and the travel is like more than 12 hours. So in this duration of 12 hours, a lot of people died, a lot of pregnant women died, a lot of children died. And let me tell you, the disease that they all were dying was not some big disease, that they all were malaria. We are living in 2023. In 2022, we didn't knew how to treat malaria. That is a big question mark on the healthcare system of Pakistan, that how they are handling their people, how they are giving, situation, how they are providing to their people. The story of human rights exploitation were exposed. No one can do anything and were feeling helpless at times. I met an old age granny who lost like 5 to 10 member of their family, and she died 2 days ago from next 2 days she died from malaria. This is the situation of more than millions of people in Pakistan. And Fahad was also mentioning IMF budget. IMF loan Pakistan gets, like with $2 billion fund recently Pakistan has got. And let me bring it to your knowledge that 2 crore Pakistani children are still not going to school. They cannot afford it. And with the IMF fund, only working class people, the people who actually can't afford to have 2 times meal and put meal on their tables are suffering from that. And our children that are not even born they owe America a huge amount of sum of loan. So you can really understand what situation is in Pakistan. And thank you so much, Drum, for organizing this and doing all this thing for your fellow citizens and for your fellow Pakistani, because we never know how the working class people have sent their children to educate in US, and we can't afford to have them back in Pakistan. The economical, social, and political crisis in Pakistan is way, way more worse than what is actually shown and what we are really, aware of. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alia. What Dr. Alia has shared are just few of the devastating stories that you hear from not only the exact time when the floods hit, but the devastation that has followed those floods this year as well. And with the IMF loan, things have gotten worse. The economic, political, social situation has just deteriorated further. And this is one of the reasons why we are campaigning for TPS for Pakistan and for the rights of the undocumented communities here, because like Dr. Alia Haider mentioned, that Pakistan cannot take any more people coming back, but people over here can really help the situation back home. With that, I would like to invite Fatima Razzaq to share her experiences in the field when the floods hit and shed some light on the current situation that is going on in Pakistan.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. I work as a journalist, and I remember like 2022, August, or otherwise like, a calm newsroom, and we had an emergency meeting. I didn't understand initially because I've seen a lot of emergency situations. I remember growing up during bomb blasts. I remember 2005 earthquake, the 2020 floods. So didn't know what exactly was coming. It was not until we started seeing footages and videos of entire hotels collapsing like sand castles or house of cards, or entire cities being flooded. It was something that we had never seen before. It wasn't just the flood that was it wasn't like 2010 actually, because in 2010 the flood was it started from up north and went up till the south, and people could still evacuate or do something. This time it was flash floods. They took people by surprise. Entire villages were drowned in a few seconds, and they didn't even know that it was coming. So I'm going to talk to you about three things. Number one, the scope of the catastrophe, just to give you an idea of what are the socioeconomic and gendered problems going on. Then I'll also talk to you about the relief work, and thirdly, how the situation is right now. Have we made some progress or not, and where we are headed? First of all, the scope of the catastrophe. Media, both international and local, covered the catastrophe, I think, only when it was sexy, when the buildings were falling, when they could get a lot out of it. After that, they just like disappeared. No one came for the flood victims during the slow, long rehabilitation process. And it was actually interesting because they captured like all the narratives that we have are of buildings falling, inundated houses, waterlogged land, crying women and children stranded on the streets. No coverage of what happened afterwards. And, after that, it was just political banter took over, and it was as if the flood never existed. And the same was the attitude of our politicians as well. I've been in areas where no politician has ever has visited so far, even up till now, despite the fact that this is election year for us. I visited areas that are still completely out of reach. The roads are broken, there's no infrastructure. People used to take boats there, but like now, like water has gone down a little, but there's no way to get to the places. It's also just to give you a snapshot of what exactly happened and what the catastrophe looks like. I can tell you that 1,700 people lost lives, 2.2 million houses were damaged, but imagine 33 million people were affected. And you know what the entire population of Australia is, like an entire continent? 22 million. Entire New Zealand, if you include that, it still doesn't reach the number of people who were impacted by floods in Pakistan. The other thing is that again, do you know that the IMF bailout package given to Pakistan in June was close to $3 billion US. According to the World Bank, the floods cost an economic damage of 30 billion US. So like just like compare, this is the bailout that we're getting. And again, this is a loan that we have to return, but the catastrophe itself is 30 billion, at least 30 billion US. We don't see in our lives it getting better. Again, it just like surprises me because we had a crop loss that has never happened before. 8.3 million acres of crop was lost, 80% of our entire rice crop. So like it didn't just impact the food security of the entire country, it also like caused massive inflation. Like even people in the cities could not afford vegetables or pulses or like rice or wheat because we had a severe shortage because most of the crop was lost in the water. And many areas where we grow the crops, they couldn't be drained even after 6 months. So the farmers could not sow the crops. And similarly, again, for a struggling economy, most of you could see like the impact on all of this would have on the GDP. Our economic growth slowed down by 2%, by more than 2% actually. And all of this meant that, communities or women, children, religious minorities, already struggling people, I think they bear the most of the brunt. A lot of the relief work could not happen this year because Pakistan had been on FATF gray list, and transactioning or sending in money, and the money related transactions were a mess. Many people, even abroad, could not send back, organizations were having a hard time getting registered, and relief this year was much, much less as compared to previous catastrophes that we've seen. We also think that the rehabilitation work is quite slow. Even as of today, when I visited flood areas in June last month, I remember like talking to women, and they mentioned that how they're not building their houses back because what if the floods come again? And even today in the news, I hear that the floods are back. Many areas are still drowning. The rains are not stopping, and it has become a trauma for them. They see the rain, and people think that what if it never stops, because they've lost everything to the rains, to the flash floods, to the flooding and melting of the ice caps in the north. So it's really bad, considering that Pakistan is already a struggling economy. Even without the floods, we were living in unprecedented times. Every year, our rents, our cost of living has been doubling. Fuel prices have been crazy, crazy here. And it's just unfortunate that this catastrophe chose to come at a time when Pakistan was already on the verge of a default. And now, in the midst of a political crisis, we have no idea when the elections are going to happen. It just feels like it just feels terrible. So I just hope that the nature of the situation can be communicated to the best of our abilities again, and something can be done for Pakistanis living abroad and people here, because honestly, a lot of people wait for their families or people settled outside to help them. They look for support from the expat Pakistanis, and they would not wish to lose that tiny bit of hope. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Fatma, for sharing the current situation of Pakistan. Before we move on to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, we would also want to hear from the international students who are studying here in Pakistan and who can benefit from the SSR policy. So I would like to introduce Raza Gilani, who is a McCracken Fellow at NYU's Hagop Kevorkian Center, enrolled in the Joint Global Journalism and Near Eastern Studies program. Please, Raza, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think a lot has been said about the devastation these floods have caused, and it would be no point in repeating things. I would just like to say one thing before I tell you what kind of impacts this is going to have for international students. Usually when we see floods or any climate catastrophe, we see it in terms of an event that happens once and then a recovery happens, and such is the unidimensional nature of such events. But in this case, we have to look at it in terms of a continuum, sort of a domino effect that impacts the social order at large and not just the direct effectees. So for example, the data says that we have 33 million direct effectees of the flood, but there are millions more that have been impacted through inflation that these floods have caused in areas that were not directly impacted by these floods. So for example, the undocumented citizenry that resides in the United States, the Pakistani undocumented people, they are also impacted by these floods, albeit in an indirect way. For international students, this becomes a big problem, because when you're on an F1 visa, there are certain restrictions under which you operate. You can work on the campus for a number of hours that is prescribed by the rules set up by the Homeland Security. But in actuality, there are things that we have to take care of. We have to take care of our families. I am fortunate enough to be on a stipend, But even with that stipend, I have to save around 50% of it just to be able to send money back home, where electricity, fuel, gas, milk, and everything is too expensive now. So in a way, I have to support my family more than how I used to when I was actually in Pakistan and I was living paycheck to paycheck. And secondly, we also need to understand the cost of leaving your country and going for education. So for example, even if you get stipends and good scholarships at certain international institutions in the United States, you literally have to take a loan to set up your living in say New York. Because for example, your stipend starts in June, but you have to get there in for example, May. So for the month of May, you do not have a scholarship and you have to raise money in order to set up all the living expenses for that month. And since you're earning in Pakistani rupee and then you have to convert it in dollar, it is a pretty big loan that, you know, involves around 3 or 4 months, 3 or 4 coming months to pay back. And then there are emergencies, there are, as I said, the costs of basic commodities have increased, and this is the domino effect. If food security insecurity was the first impact of these floods outside the areas that were impacted by these floods, then the inflation that has followed, the rise in the price of electricity and in say fuel have resulted in more expensive vegetables, fruits, and basic commodities that people live. So if SSR is granted to international students, it will allow them to get better employment outside the certain restrictions that I just mentioned. It will allow them to work more. It will allow them to affect their course load and design it in such a way that they're not burnt out. It's not a race anymore where you have to take classes and then you have to figure out how to send money back home and then have further worry if something bad happens in cases of emergency. So this is the general context and under which international students reside, and it would be really helpful if provisions like student special relief are offered to them. It will decrease a lot of burden that we live under. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reza, for sharing both on-the-ground realities and sort of what this means for international students. I had already shared the bio for Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. Once again, we're honored to have her here as a longtime champion of issues related to the Pakistani communities here and back home in Pakistan, and as the lead on the resolution calling for TPS for Pakistan in the aftermath of the floods. I will now call on Representative Jackson Lee to share her comments.
Well, let me thank you for this gathering and appreciate the drum movement and the Desks Rising Up. This is a timely moment as we are approaching a year of this catastrophic and unspeakable event in Pakistan and in regions of more impoverished people. We realize that, as I saw with my own eyes, people who were stranded in the worst ways, people who were in the crevices of mountains with their animals and all their belongings, taking an aerial survey as the first Americans to ever come to Pakistan in the midst of this catastrophic event. I led the first Codel and the first touching down of Americans, that we saw the trees, we saw the broken freeways and bridges where souls were on one side and other souls were on the other. For all we know that they were walking across and got separated, and there was no rescue at that time. They literally were making a home on the bridge and praying for rescue. We saw Dadu, where it was isolated, one dry spot, and came there to deal with the distribution of food. We helped a man who had not had his medicine And I told the military in a polite way, please go fly somewhere and get his medicine because he could not get out. And he was a kidney transplant patient. So just imagine all those who had not. One of the things that touched my heart was the potential of 70,000 births, women who were stranded. And I begged every day that I was there. And I just heard the doctor to ensure that some makeshift process will be there for these birthing mothers and these newborn babies, which I hope they heard me over and over again. We met with every leader of government, particularly the climate change minister, and everyone is acknowledging what we are facing. The foreign minister, this was his territory, if you will. And we knew we had a mountain, in essence, to climb. I was very pleased to introduce HRES 23. It is a resolution that hopefully we can continue to push and even get the State Department to move forward on the question of TPS for Pakistan and to recognize that we are at a point where people cannot go home. While I was there, I was able to get additional monies donated to Pakistan from the United States and an airlift of 30,000 tents at that time. We know that that is not going to be sufficient, and that's not the kind of housing that is long-term. I want to take note of the resolution that we indicate over 7 million women and children are in desperate need of nutrition and immediate life-saving support, with food shortages causing pregnant women to be at heightened risk of having low birth rate babies, and 1 in 9 Pakistani children suffering from acute malnutrition. We worked with the United Nations. We left them with that responsibility, and UNICEF and Save the Children. A number of those agencies have been in trillions and trillions of gallons of water, and an immediate estimation of the country's impact on the economy may be as much as $15 billion, and it may be more at this point. So I'm here to join you on the relief. This is an important form of assistance for Pakistan today and those who are here in the United States. And we have to continue to press forward with the statistics that show us human suffering and that people cannot return to their place. There's no ability for their sustenance, and they need to be protected as long as possible for Pakistan and the region in particular to be restored. So I'm delighted to have been able to come on to be with you, and also delighted to be part of the crusade, the advocacy, along with members of Congress, and your presence on the Hill was very constructive, and we look forward to that again. And I am committed to answering the call for Pakistan. I chair the Congressional Pakistan Caucus. It's still one of the largest. And I've been very pleased that our members stand ready to assist. We have been very strong in blocking any amendments, which we expect to see some coming up that would undermine the relationship between the United States and Pakistan. So thank you so very much for having me. And thank you for your advocacy. We're here to save lives, and that's what I want to do, save lives, and to be honest with you, promote a democratic Pakistan.
Thank you so much for your comments, and we really appreciate the steps you are taking for Pakistan, especially with regards to the TPS bill that can benefit not only a large chunk of the undocumented community and international students here, but through them help a lot of people back in Pakistan. So thank you so much for sharing your comments. And moving on, we would also like to share here a statement directly coming from one of the undocumented Pakistani immigrants residing in New York, who is a drum member. And we would like to play their video statement here and share it with all of you.
I will listen to some of it. As it started, is it long? I'm going to a meeting.
It's very short. It's like 3 minutes.
I want to hear them. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And I'll look forward to hearing from you all and as we advocate together. Thank you.
Rep Lee, I'm sorry. I think you accidentally became host. Are you able to make me the host again?
Oh, you're kidding. Laura, somebody, I made myself the host. Can you unhost me?
Yeah, back to Carolyn, please.
I don't see. I'm sorry. Can I unplug this?
Mhm.
Okay, we're good.
We're the host on our end. Hello?
We're good.
I think we're good. Yes, we'll be playing the video now.
No audio.
Did I miss him?
You can start your video because the host stopped it. Oh, they stopped our video.
There's still no audio, I think.
We can share it though. We can tell them we can share it.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
मेरा नाम अब्दुल कयूम है, मैं ड्रम का मेंबर हूँ। मैं पिछले 33 साल से ब्रुकलिन न्यूयॉर्क लिटिल पाकिस्तान में रह रहा हूँ। मेरा तलक पाकिस्तान सांगला हिल पंजाब से है। मैं 1990 के दरमियान अमेरिका में दूसरे यंग पाकिस्तानियों की तरह बेटर लाइफ के लिए आया था और अमेरिका के लिए भी हेल्प करना चाहता था कि अमेरिका ग्रेट कंट्रियों में शामिल रहे और अपने लिए बेहतर फ्यूचर, अपनी फैमिली के लिए बेहतर फ्यूचर के लिए काम करना चाहता था। आई कम हियर वर्किंग हार्ड, पे द टैक्स, लॉट ऑफ मनी टैक्स में टैक्स पे कर रहा हूँ। वर्किंग ड्राइवर पिछले 26 साल से मैं ड्राइविंग कर रहा हूँ और पाकिस्तान और अमेरिका में एक लोगों की हेल्प कर रहा हूँ। 26 साल से वर्किंग 10 आवर 7 डे per week। 26 साल से आई नेवर हैव एनी वेकेशन। कभी मुझे कोई सिक डे नहीं मिला। काम किया 33 साल में अमेरिका में रहते हुए पीछे मैं आज तक नहीं जा सका, जिसका मुझे बहुत दुख है। मैं हर रोज़ पाकिस्तान जाने का बारे में सोचता हूँ कि मैं पाकिस्तान जाऊँ, मगर मैं नहीं जा सकता कि मेरे पास पेपर नहीं है। इन 33 सालों में सबसे बड़ा जो मेरा नुकसान है वो मेरे माँ बाप पास्ट हुए। मैं उनको आज भी मिस करता हूँ। मेरे बहुत से फैमिली मेम्बर पास्ट हुए, मेरे फ्रेंड्स पास्ट हुए, तो ये हमारे लिए बहुत मुश्किल टाइम है। और जैसे अभी हालात हैं पाकिस्तान के, हम जाके अपनी आंखों से देखना चाहते हैं और उनकी बेहतर हेल्प करने की कोशिश कर सकते हैं। मेरे साथ और भी बहुत से दोस्त हैं जो मेरा साथ देते हैं पाकिस्तान दूसरे लोगों को की हेल्प करने के लिए। आजकल पाकिस्तान में इलेक्ट्रिसिटी की प्राइस बहुत हाई है, वो लोगों को बहुत उसका मसला है। हम उसकी भी हेल्प करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। और उसके बाद आ जाता है फूड और मेडिसिन, हम उसके लिए भी पूरी कोशिश कर रहे हैं। हम जितने लोगों की भी मदद कर सकें हम करने की कोशिश करते हैं। तो हमारी यही एक दरख्वास्त है कि हमारे लिए TPS का प्रोग्राम मंजूर किया जाए, हमारी हेल्प की जाए और हम बेहतर तरीके से इधर भी काम कर सकें। अमेरिका के लिए भी हम अभी भी कर रहे हैं और आइंदा भी हम करते रहेंगे। अब ये हमारी ही कंट्री है, मैं 33 साल से इधर हूँ, मुझे कभी नहीं महसूस हुआ कि ये मेरी कंट्री नहीं है। मगर अपना मुल्क, अपने बहन भाई माँ बाप को जाके देखना, दोस्तों को देखना मिलना, वो भी एक हमारा ख्वाब है कि हम उम्मीद करते हैं कि हमारा वो ख्वाब जल्दी पूरा होगा। आपसे यही दोबारा एक दरख्वास्त है कि हमारा ये प्रोग्राम, इसमें हमारी हेल्प की जाए और हमें इसमें वर्क परमिट मिल जाए या पेपर हमें कुछ दें, हम ट्रैवल कर सकें और अपने बहन भाइयों को जाकर देख सकें, उनसे मिल सकें, उनकी हेल्प कर सकें। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
So that was Abdul Qayyum, one of our members from Midwood, Little Pakistan. And you've seen that they're suffering from a lot themselves, being undocumented, but they're still trying to help a lot of people back in Pakistan. And granting TPS would just ensure that they can help them more. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Councilwoman Shahana Hanif to share her views, since in collaboration with Pakistani drum member Shahana Hanif has been the one who's constructed and introduced a resolution voicing support for TPS for Pakistani nationals.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Deep appreciation to Fahad, Mohiba, and the drum team. I also want to extend my thank you to Rep. Sheila Jackson Lee, and especially for her visit on the ground and really committing to the security and sanctuary of Pakistan and Pakistanis everywhere, and also really relating that work to ensuring a stronger, safer democracy. This is at the root of the work that I do too, and so it is really an honor to be mobilizing with our federal reps who believe in that vision. To Dr. Alia Haider, Fatima Razzaq, and Reza Jalani, and others on the ground who have been supporting, those who are outside of Pakistan supporting, to the flood impacted families and shedding the awareness, and particularly raising the alarm on the issues that we're not reading about as New Yorkers here, just on the disproportionate impact that the flooding catastrophe has had, and particularly its impact on women and the working class and undocumented marginalized communities, because those are the stories that we seldom do not hear about. And money often does get raised by charities and our communities, but we often do not know to whom and which parts of the geography they're landing at. And so thank you so much for just shedding more awareness on the impacts that climate change has on people's healthcare, education access for young people, access to food and growing food, and the impact that it has is not simply on the people living in Pakistan, but the indirect impact that Raza really highlighted is really important to know, and particularly those of the students who are out here and trying to further their educational journey while supporting their families in Pakistan. And then, of course, as an elected official, it is really shameful to learn about the lack of the promptness. I'm sure, as we heard from Rep. Lee, that elected officials or the foreign ministers and dignitaries have shared their awareness, but it seems like that there's been a delay and a lack of promptness around infrastructure rebuilding, and that there's a massive delay from electeds in addressing the long-term infrastructure needs of climate injustice, and we see that everywhere. That it's not simply a Pakistani issue around climate injustice. You know, we're out here in New York City, where we just spent weeks ago under orange skies, the impacts of the Canadian wildfires, to now until Saturday, extreme heat in our city. And so these impacts are shared across our nation, and we need to have leaders who are really taking these concerns seriously, and not just for the short term, but for the long term livability of our communities. I am moved by Abdul Qayyum's story. This is the first time that I am really hearing his courageous voice, and it really brings emotions to any one of us hearing his words, that he hasn't been able to travel back to his home, that his parents died while he's been out here toiling, working so hard to ensure their safety, to ensure the safety of his extended family here and abroad. And so I encourage you to take action. We've learned so much. We've heard the direct impact from Abdul, and although he's a New Yorker, we know that there are countless stories like this of Pakistanis, and particularly Pakistani undocumented folks. We really need to pressure and onboard local, state, and federal electeds to hear their voice, know their stories, and to support TPS. I know that Drum, after this emergency briefing, is going to share to everyone signed on, those who couldn't make it either, to a letter that will allow you to join this call to action, to reach out to your elected officials, and to really create the momentum necessary, the urgent momentum necessary to ensure that the resolution, both at the federal level, at the council level, moves ahead, and that ultimately that these people receive the security that they deserve. In our city, we've got the largest number of Pakistanis, and especially working class Pakistanis, but Pakistanis are scattered across the US, particularly in cities in Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles. But these folks don't need to live in your city for folks to step up. And it's been an honor to join in this advocacy fight with Drum members who've helped my team and I to put together this resolution on behalf of the largest city in the nation, calling on President Biden to grant TPS. And so I invite electeds, the staffers who are here, and community advocates to get in touch with my office and with Drum to introduce similar resolutions in your city or municipality, to really create an echo chamber of solidarity that's absolutely needed right now, so that the message is received by President Biden, because they have the power to grant TPS with just a stroke of a pen. Again, I just want to extend my gratitude to Drum on drafting and helping us introduce this resolution. We did so in June of this year. Sorry about that. And this resolution is both to grant temporary protected status and special student relief, SSR, to those impacted by the catastrophic flooding in Pakistan who are now in the United States. And I look forward to continuing to work together with Drum and this beautiful coalition to ensure that we get to President Biden and protect the sanctity and well-being of Pakistanis everywhere, and particularly in our cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman, and thank you so much for supporting so many of the undocumented Pakistani workers who are Drum members and otherwise. Just extending what Councilwoman put forward, we are going to share ways in which you can connect with this campaign and connect with the fight for TPS for Pakistan. You can see the points of action that you can take in your capacity to help us win TPS for Pakistan. So please just take a moment to go through this, and thank you so much for attending. If you want to reach out and know more about our campaign, you can reach out to either Mohammed or me through these emails. And after this call, we'll make sure to follow up with all of you who have attended and share more updates on the campaign. I thank you all once again, to whosoever has joined, especially our experts from Pakistan, who I think at their end it's 2 a.m. It's 2 a.m. in Pakistan, and they still join, which just means how committed they are to this cause as well. And we'll share the recording with you all as well after the call. So please let us know if there are any questions, any comments, and if not, thank you for joining, and we'll be closing off now.